November 2nd, 1944. 3:47 p.m. Somewhere over occupied Czechoslovakia. Lieutenant Bruce Carr glances down at the engine instruments of his P-51 Mustang and immediately knows he is out of time. The oil pressure needle, steady moments ago, drops straight to zero. Not low. Not fluctuating. Zero. A second later, black smoke pours from the cowling, thick and oily, streaming back across the windscreen. Inside the nose of the aircraft, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine begins to scream, a sound no pilot ever forgets. Metal grinds against metal. Bearings overheat. Pistons start to weld themselves to their cylinders. 30 seconds earlier, Carr had been leading a strafing run against a German airfield, his 6.50 caliber machine guns raking hangars and parked aircraft. Now, at 12,000 feet, he is a dead man flying. An 88mm flak shell had detonated close enough to spray shrapnel through the Mustang's engine compartment. One jagged fragment punched clean through the oil line. Without lubrication, the Merlin will seize in roughly 90 seconds. When it does, the propeller will lock solid, a 400-pound steel disc turning the P-51 into a falling brick. Carr does not panic. Panic wastes time. He counts seconds. He pulls the canopy release. Cold air explodes into the cockpit. He trims the aircraft, rolls the Mustang inverted, unbuckles, and drops. For an instant, there is only silence and sky. Then gravity takes hold. The wind tears at his flight suit as the ground rushes up. At 8,000 feet, Carr yanks the ripcord. The parachute deploys with a violent jerk that snaps his shoulders back and steals the breath from his lungs. The silk canopy stabilizes above him. Below, enemy territory stretches in every direction. Carr hangs beneath the parachute, rotating slowly, taking stock. He has no radio. No food. No water. No maps. His only weapon is a .45 caliber pistol with 7 rounds in the magazine. He is approximately 200 meters behind German lines. It is early November. In Central Europe, nights drop below freezing. The forests are damp, dark, and unforgiving. The math is merciless. American pilots shot down over occupied territory have roughly a 23% chance of evading capture and returning to Allied lines. The other 77% disappear into prison camps like Stalag Luft 3, or into unmarked graves. Bruce Carr is about to become the exception to every statistic ever written about downed airmen. Because in 4 days, he will not only escape. He will steal one of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the German arsenal and fly it home. Bruce Ward Carr was born on January 28, 1924, in Union Springs, New York. There was nothing extraordinary about his childhood, no privileged upbringing, no military lineage, no early signs of legend. Except one thing. At 15 years old, in 1939, Bruce Carr learned how to fly. The year matters. In September of that year, Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. A farm kid in upstate New York could not have known that within 5 years he would be dogfighting Messerschmitts over Germany, but some instinct told him that aviation was about to define the age. Carr didn't learn to fly in a military program or a formal school. A local crop duster named Earl owned a battered biplane and occasionally let the kid take the controls. One summer afternoon was all it took. Carr was hooked. By the time he turned 16, he had logged more stick time than many Army Air Corps cadets would accumulate in their first year of training. He learned not from manuals, but from feel, how an aircraft talked to you through the controls, how it warned you before a stall, how to push it without breaking it. On September 3, 1942, Carr enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces. He was 18 years old. At aviation cadet training, fate played a strange hand. One of his instructors was Earl, the same man who had first let him fly years earlier. Earl reviewed Carr's application, saw the logged flight hours, and immediately recommended him for the accelerated program. Carr moved fast. By August 1943, he was a flight officer. By February 1944, he was in England. By spring, he was assigned to the 380th Fighter Squadron, 363rd Fighter Group, 9th Air Force. His aircraft, the P-51 Mustang. The Mustang was not just a fighter, it was a revolution. With drop tanks, it could escort bombers from England to Berlin and back. It flew at 437 miles per hour at altitude, climbed to nearly 42,000 feet, and carried 6.50 caliber machine guns with nearly 2,000 rounds of ammunition. Before the Mustang arrived in force, American daylight bombing raids were catastrophes. In October 1943, the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single mission over Schweinfurt. Without long-range escort, B-17s and B-24s were flying coffins. The Mustang changed everything. German pilots called it the long-nosed bastard. Carr fell in love instantly. The cockpit fit him like it had been built for his body. The aircraft was stable but lethal, forgiving but deadly in skilled hands. He named his Mustang Angel's playmate. He had no idea that 8 months later he would be sitting in a cockpit covered in German labels, with a swastika on the tail. On March 8, 1944, Carr saw his first real combat. He spotted a Messerschmitt Bf 109 over Germany and gave chase. The German pilot dove for the deck, skimming treetops at over 400 miles per hour. Carr followed, dangerously low, dangerously fast. He fired once. Missed. Fired again. One round clipped the Messerschmitt's wing. The German pilot panicked, pulled up, ejected too low, and died when his parachute failed to deploy fully. Carr returned to base expecting congratulations. Instead, his commanding officer tore into him. "That was the most over-aggressive flying I've ever seen. You nearly killed yourself." "The kill doesn't count." Carr was transferred. To some officers, he was reckless. To Carr, the lesson was simple: limits were often imaginary. That difference would define everything that followed. The transfer that was meant as a reprimand turned into an opportunity. In May 1944, Bruce Carr was reassigned to the 353rd Fighter Squadron of the 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustang Group. This was no ordinary unit. The 354th had been the first American fighter group in Europe to fly the P-51 Mustang in combat, and by mid-1944 it had become a magnet for aggressive, highly skilled pilots who believed air combat was won by initiative, not caution. Carr fit immediately. Here, his flying style was not merely tolerated, it was valued. The squadron's culture rewarded pilots who pressed advantages, who understood that hesitation killed as surely as enemy fire. Carr found himself among men who thought the way he did, who believed the aircraft existed to be pushed to its limits. The war was changing fast. June 6, 1944, D-Day, opened the Western Front. Allied armies poured into Normandy, and the Luftwaffe was forced to fight defensively over its own shrinking territory. German pilots were still dangerous, but their numbers were thinning, their fuel was scarce, and their training pipeline was collapsing. On June 17, just 11 days after the landings, Carr scored his first official victory. He and another pilot shared credit for destroying a Focke-Wulf FW-190 over Normandy. It was not glamorous, no long pursuit, no dramatic explosion, but it counted. 2 months later, Carr was promoted to second lieutenant. By late summer, the tempo increased. Missions blurred together: bomber escort, armed reconnaissance, strafing runs against rail yards, convoys, and airfields. Carr learned to read the battlefield from altitude, how flak patterns revealed hidden gun positions, how smoke trails betrayed damaged aircraft, how a formation's shape hinted at experience or desperation. On September 12, 1944, Carr's flight attacked a German airfield. Junkers Ju-88 bombers burned on the ground under Mustang gunfire. As they pulled away, Carr spotted movement below, 30 Focke-Wulf 190s flying 2,000 feet beneath them. Most pilots would have reported the sighting and disengaged. Carr did not hesitate. He rolled inverted and dove. The Mustangs fell like stones, engines howling. In the chaos that followed, Carr shot down 3 German fighters in under 3 minutes. When his wingman took damage, Carr abandoned the fight and escorted him all the way back to friendly territory, refusing to chase additional kills. For that action, he received the Silver Star. By October 29, Carr downed 2 more Messerschmitt Bf-109s over Germany. His total reached 7.5 confirmed kills, enough to earn the title every fighter pilot chased but few achieved. Ace. For days later, his luck ran out. November 2, 1944. Carr hit the frozen Czechoslovakian ground hard. The parachute landing was controlled but unforgiving. His right ankle twisted violently on impact, not broken, but badly sprained. Pain shot up his leg as he rolled to his feet. He didn't stay long. Carr gathered the parachute silk and buried it under leaves and soil. The Germans would search for him. They always did. Downed Allied pilots meant intelligence, propaganda, and leverage. He estimated he had perhaps 20 minutes before patrols arrived. Carr knew several things immediately. The airfield he had just attacked was roughly 5 miles north. The Germans would assume he would move south or west, toward Allied lines. That assumption would shape their search pattern. So Carr did the opposite. He headed north. The logic was cold and calculated. Moving toward the enemy seemed insane, but it was exactly why it would work. The Germans would expand outward, not inward. And if Carr was going to survive, he needed supplies. Food. Water. Shelter. Possibly a weapon. An airfield had all of those. The first night was slow and painful. Carr stayed off roads, moving through forest, favoring shadow over speed. His flight suit offered little warmth. His ankle throbbed with every step. By dawn, he was exhausted. Day 2 brought thirst. Carr found a narrow stream and drank greedily, the icy water numbing his throat. Later, he spotted a German patrol 200 yards away and flattened himself into a ditch, remaining motionless for over 2 hours as boots crunched past. Day 3 was worse. Hunger became a physical force. Carr was burning thousands of calories simply staying warm, and he had eaten nothing since bailing out. His body began to cannibalize itself. His thoughts slowed. His movements became deliberate, economical. That night, Carr made a decision. Tomorrow, he would surrender. Captured airmen were treated differently. The Luftwaffe respected pilots, even enemy ones. Carr knew men who had been to Stalag Luft 3. Boring, yes. But survivable. 3 meals a day. Red Cross parcels. Letters from home. It beat dying alone in a forest. Day 4. Late afternoon. Carr reached the edge of the German airfield. From a tree line overlooking the eastern perimeter, he studied the base. Hangars. Fuel trucks. Aircraft parked in revetments. Messerschmitts. A handful of vehicles. Light activity. He planned to wait until morning and walk to the main gate with his hands raised. Then he noticed something. One revetment lay roughly 80 yards from his position. Inside sat a Focke-Wulf FW-190, partially concealed beneath camouflage netting. 2 German mechanics worked under portable lights. Carr watched carefully. They checked fuel levels. Full tanks. They ran the engine, the deep, brutal roar of the BMW 801 radial filling the night air. They cycled the propeller, checked the magnetos, completed a full pre-flight inspection. Then they shut it down, covered the cockpit, and walked away. The aircraft was ready to fly. Carr's mind shifted gears. He had never flown a German aircraft. He didn't speak German. He had no idea where the controls were, how the engine started, or how the landing gear operated. But he knew how to fly. He had logged over 500 combat hours. Every aircraft obeyed the same laws of physics. Throttle. Stick. Rudder. Lift. Drag. Power. He was looking at a fully fueled fighter aircraft sitting unguarded behind enemy lines. The surrender plan vanished. Carr waited until 3 a.m. The airfield was quiet. Only a skeleton crew remained. No movement near the revetment. He moved. 80 yards of open ground. No cover. If spotted, he would be shot on sight. Carr crossed the distance in 40 seconds, staying low, his ankle screaming with every step. The Focke-Wulf was larger than he expected. He climbed onto the wing, slid the canopy back, and dropped into the cockpit. Nothing was familiar. Every label was in German. Gothic script. Unreadable. The cockpit was cramped compared to the Mustang. His knees pressed against the panel. But some things were universal. The stick felt right in his hand. The throttle was on the left. Carr had 4 hours until sunrise. He used every minute. The cockpit of the Focke-Wulf FW-190 was a foreign country. Bruce Carr sat motionless in the darkness, breathing slowly, forcing his pulse down. Panic would kill him faster than any German guard. He needed to turn confusion into a system, one problem at a time. He began with what he knew. Every aircraft, regardless of nationality, obeyed the same logic. Airspeed was usually top left. Altimeter near the center. Engine instruments grouped together. Fuel gauges near the lower panel. He traced wiring with his fingers, memorizing shapes and layouts by touch and moonlight. The FW-190 felt different from the Mustang. Heavier. More compact. The cockpit walls were thick with armor. The canopy framing was brutal, industrial. This was not a gentleman's airplane. It was a weapon. He located the fuel selector. The magneto switches. The propeller pitch control. Slowly, the chaos resolved into something usable. The last piece was the starter. In the Mustang, it was electrical. Turn the switch, press the button, the Merlin came alive. The BMW 801 radial was another beast entirely. On the right side of the cockpit, Carr found a T-shaped handle labeled in German. The word was unfamiliar, but close enough to something that meant start. He pulled it. Nothing. He pushed it back. A mechanical whine filled the cockpit, an inertia starter winding up, spinning faster and faster like a giant spring under tension. Carr waited. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Then he pulled the handle again. The engine coughed once, then detonated into life. The BMW 801 roared, a deep, thunderous sound that shook the aircraft. 14 cylinders hammered in unison, producing 1,700 horsepower at idle. The vibration rattled his bones. Every German on the airfield heard it. Carr did not hesitate. He shoved the throttle forward. The FW-190 lurched. The tail came up almost immediately. The aircraft was nose-heavy, eager to fly, nothing like the balanced Mustang. He aimed between two hangars, barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. Shadows moved. Men shouted. At 60 miles per hour, the ground blurred. At 70, faster. At 90, Carr pulled back. The fighter leapt into the air. He cleared the hangar roofs by what felt like inches. Bruce Carr was airborne in a stolen German fighter, 200 meters behind enemy lines. Now came the real test. The cockpit was still a maze of unknowns. He needed airspeed. Altitude. Direction. Landing gear. He scanned left, found a lever, and pulled. A solid mechanical thunk answered him. The gear retracted. Good. Compass. He identified the gyroscope compass and turned west-southwest, toward France, toward Allied lines. He climbed briefly to 500 feet, then reconsidered. At altitude, he would be visible to radar, to fighters, to flak batteries tracking anything that moved. He shoved the nose down and dropped to treetop level. 50 feet. 280 miles per hour. The forest below became a green blur. This was insanity, one mistake and he would disintegrate against the trees. But at this altitude he was invisible to radar, too low for flak, too fast for ground fire to track. The fuel gauge read full. Range, roughly 500 miles. Distance to France, 200. For 45 minutes, Carr flew west. The sun rose behind him. The landscape shifted from forest to farmland to the scarred geometry of battlefields. Craters. Burned villages. Wrecked vehicles. Then he crossed the front line. And everything went wrong. Allied anti-aircraft gunners saw exactly what they expected to see. A German FW-190 flying low and fast toward Allied positions. They opened fire. .50 caliber tracers arced upward, stitching the air around Carr from every direction. He was taking fire from his own side. He had no radio. No markings to identify himself as friendly. Black crosses still marked the wings. A swastika sat on the tail. Carr pushed lower. 20 feet. Hedge hopping. Dust and debris exploded behind the prop wash. French civilians dove into ditches as he screamed overhead. American soldiers fired rifles at him from the fields. Every gun in France seemed to be shooting at Bruce Carr. Rounds hit the aircraft. He felt the impact through the airframe, heard metal strike metal. The German engineering absorbed the punishment. The FW-190 kept flying. After 30 agonizing miles, Carr saw salvation. A familiar airfield layout. Grass runways. Dispersed revetments. A-66. Compiègne. Home of the 354th Fighter Group. His home. He lined up for approach, no pattern, no radio call. The anti-aircraft batteries were already tracking him. Then he discovered the final problem. The landing gear would not deploy. Carr pulled the lever. Nothing. He pumped it. Nothing. He searched frantically for a backup system, an emergency release, anything. He didn't know that the FW-190's hydraulic selector valve had to be repositioned. He didn't know he was pulling the wrong control. Below him, ground crews loaded 40mm guns. They were preparing to shoot him down. Carr made the decision instantly. Belly landing. He lined up alongside the main runway, lowered the flaps, at least that lever worked, and cut the throttle. The FW-190 settled. 100 feet. 50. 20. The aircraft slammed into the grass at 90 miles per hour, skidding violently. Mud and debris erupted in a towering rooster tail. The fighter slid 300 yards, metal shrieking, then ground to a stop. Silence. Carr was alive. Within seconds, military police surrounded the wreck, rifles raised. They expected a German pilot. The canopy slid back. A mud-covered American in a torn flight suit climbed onto the wing. "I'm Captain Carr," he said, "of this goddamn squadron." No one believed him. He had been missing for 4 days. Presumed dead or captured. And he had just landed a German fighter on their field. The rifles stayed trained on him until a staff car arrived. Colonel George Bickle stepped out, took in the scene, the wrecked FW-190, the stunned MPs, the filthy pilot, and shook his head. "Where in the hell have you been?" he asked, "and what the hell have you been doing?" Bruce Carr's return in a stolen German fighter became legend almost overnight. Pilots talked about it in mess halls. Ground crews repeated it with embellishment. Intelligence officers took notes. The Army Air Forces quietly documented the event, confirmed the details, and then moved on. The war did not slow down for stories, no matter how extraordinary. Carr spent weeks answering questions. Engineers crawled over the wrecked Focke-Wulf, cataloging systems, comparing German design philosophy to American practice. Carr himself became an object of fascination, but also of scrutiny. The official verdict was blunt: his actions had been reckless, unauthorized, and completely indefensible by regulation. They were also successful. Carr returned to flying combat missions. By early 1945, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self, but it was still dangerous. Germany had begun fielding newer variants, the Bf-109G10, the FW-190DE9, fast, heavily armed, and flown by the last cadre of trained pilots remaining. Fuel shortages limited flight hours, but desperation made German pilots aggressive. On April 2, 1945, First Lieutenant Bruce Carr led a flight of 4 P-51 Mustangs on a reconnaissance sweep near Schweinfurt. They were at 15,000 feet when Carr spotted movement above them. At first, it looked like cloud fragments. Then the shapes resolved. German fighters. Not a handful. Dozens. Carr estimated quickly. 60 aircraft, maybe more, stacked in altitude from 18,000 to 25,000 feet. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs mixed together. A formation large enough to devastate a bomber stream. Carr had 4 aircraft. Every manual ever written screamed the same instruction: disengage. Report the contact. Preserve your force. Carr keyed his radio. Engaging. His wingmen did not question him. They had flown with Carr long enough to understand what that word meant. The 4 Mustangs climbed. The Germans did not expect it. From their perspective, a handful of American fighters climbing directly into a massive formation made no tactical sense. For a few critical seconds, confusion rippled through the German ranks. Carr used it. He slipped into the rear of the formation, tucked in behind a Bf-109, and fired. The Messerschmitt disintegrated in a cloud of flame and debris. Carr rolled, shifted targets. An FW-190 crossed his sights. 3 seconds of .50 caliber fire. The German fighter snapped, inverted, and fell away. The formation began to break apart. Pilots jettisoned drop tanks, scattered, dove, climbed, anything to escape an enemy they could not count or locate. Carr moved through them methodically. 3rd kill. 4th. 5th. In under 3 minutes, Carr destroyed 5 enemy aircraft. His wingmen added 10 more. 15 German fighters fell out of the sky. The Americans lost none. When ammunition ran low, Carr regrouped his flight and led them home. Behind them, 45 German aircraft scattered across the countryside, their mission abandoned. The largest engagement Carr ever fought ended as quickly as it began. On April 9, 1945, Bruce Carr was promoted to captain. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. The citation stated that he had completely disregarded his personal safety and the enemy's overwhelming numerical superiority. Carr became the last American ace in a single day in the European theater. When Germany surrendered weeks later, Carr had flown 172 combat missions and accumulated between 14 and 15 confirmed aerial victories, depending on the record consulted. He was 21 years old. The war ended. Carr stayed in uniform. He joined the Acrojets, America's first jet aerobatic demonstration team, flying the F-80 Shooting Star. He transitioned from piston engines to jets with the same instinctive confidence that had carried him through combat. Then came Korea. Flying F-86 Sabres with the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, Carr completed 57 combat missions. He later commanded the squadron, earning the rank of colonel. The farm kid from Union Springs was now running a fighter unit in another war, another generation of aircraft. Then Vietnam. By the late 1960s, Carr was 44 years old. He flew 286 combat missions in F-100 Super Sabres, close air support, bombing runs, low-level strikes. The same dangerous work he had done decades earlier, now in jet aircraft over Southeast Asia. 3 wars. 3 generations of fighters. 505 combat missions. Carr retired from the Air Force in 1973. On April 25, 1998, in St. Cloud, Florida, Bruce Ward Carr died of prostate cancer. He was 74 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 64, Grave 6922, among soldiers from every American war since the Revolution. The headstone lists his rank, Colonel, United States Air Force. It lists his decorations: Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross with Clusters, Air Medal with Clusters, Purple Heart. It lists his wars: World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It does not mention the stolen fighter. It does not mention 4 days in a freezing forest. It does not mention the belly landing with no landing gear. Some stories do not fit on stone. There are 2 ways history remembers men like Bruce Carr. The first is the legend. The downed pilot who landed behind enemy lines, evaded capture for 4 days, stole a fully fueled German fighter from an operational airfield, figured out its systems by trial and instinct, and flew it 200 miles back to Allied territory while every gun, enemy and friendly, tried to kill him. That version spreads easily. It fits into a paragraph. It sounds impossible. It becomes a story told late at night by pilots who want to believe that audacity alone can bend reality. The second way is the record. The ace with 15 aerial victories. The Silver Star recipient. The Distinguished Service Cross winner. The pilot who led for aircraft against 60 and won. The officer who flew combat missions in 3 wars across 3 technological eras. Both versions are true. But neither explains why Bruce Carr did what he did. In November 1944, Carr stood at the edge of a German airfield, hungry, injured, and alone. Every rational calculation pointed toward surrender. The safe choice was obvious. The logical choice was survival through captivity. Carr saw something else. Where others saw a locked boundary, he saw an opening. Where others saw a machine meant only for enemies, he saw a set of controls governed by the same laws of physics he had trusted his life to since he was 15 years old. He did not steal the Focke-Wulf because he was reckless. He stole it because he refused to accept that the situation defined the limits of his options. That same instinct reappeared in April 1945. For Mustangs. 60 German fighters. Retreat was reasonable. Reporting the contact would have been correct. Survival would have been applauded. Carr chose attack, not because he underestimated the enemy, but because he understood something deeper: surprise is a weapon, and hesitation is a liability. In both moments, Carr asked the same question. What else can I do? In 1997, a year before his death, Bruce Carr flew one more time. Kermit Week's Fantasy of Flight Museum in Florida invited him to participate in an air show. Carr arrived flying a P-51 Mustang, his own aircraft, meticulously maintained, fully airworthy. He was 73 years old. As the crowd watched, Carr came in low and fast, 300 knots, 50 feet off the deck. It was the same profile he had flown half a century earlier, screaming across France in a stolen German fighter while friendly guns chased him. He pulled up into a climbing roll, then a loop. High G turns followed, maneuvers that strained even younger pilots. Carr's Mustang carved the sky with the same authority it had over Europe. When he landed, someone asked him what he had been thinking up there. Carr shrugged. Same thing I was always thinking, he said. What's the airplane capable of? What am I capable of? Let's find out. That answer explains more than any citation ever written. Bruce Carr was not fearless. He understood risk intimately. He simply refused to be ruled by it. He believed that limits existed to be tested, not accepted. That training mattered, but judgment mattered more. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act when fear presented itself as reason. His headstone does not mention the Focke-Wulf. It does not mention the forest. It does not mention the night takeoff, the belly landing, or the rifles pointed at his chest by men who thought he was the enemy. Stone has limits. Stories do not. Bruce Ward Carr lived a life defined not by what was expected of him, but by what he decided was possible. That is the Bruce Carr story. Not the stolen fighter. Not the 15 kills. not the three wars. It is the story of a man who looked at impossible odds and asked a single, dangerous question. What else can I do?